inspire others by living the truth that I know. The author Paulo Coelho observed, "The world is changed by your example, not by your opinion." While I might have a lot of great ideas how to better myself and the world, these ideas mean little if I do not live from the truth I know. Believing in the oneness of all life, I actively stand up for the rights of all people to be treated with love, respect, and dignity. With faith in spirit as the constant source of my abundance, I regularly tithe my time, talent, and treasure in service to others. Grasping in my heart the divine idea of unconditional love, I regularly practice compassion and forgiveness and actively promote a peaceful community in the world. When I live my faith, I inspire others to do the same. And from Peter, those who desire life and desire to see good days, let them turn away from evil and do good. Let them seek peace and pursue it. And so it is. Let's take these thoughts into the silence.
Let's pray. Today we just say in gratitude for the one and only power of the universe that is only good and that lies within each and every one of us if we are willing to recognize and acknowledge it so that it can be realized through our very beings, into our affairs and into the world around us. Is what the master teacher called the good news. It's the good news that we can have a better life than we had yesterday. And for that we are so grateful. We open up with these hearts of gratitude in this moment and say yes. Yes to life, yes to love, yes to power, and yes to wisdom. In this moment, we call out within our very souls, within our very beings, the name of God. I am. And so it is. Amen. Namaste. Well, here we are, 21 chapters into Dr. Katie, and none of you have fallen asleep yet. Unity ministers say you can't teach this old stuff because people today fall asleep. None of you have fallen asleep. None of you have missed a beat of this. Because I think one of the things that you're beginning to appreciate is that Dr. Katie 100 plus years ago was unveiling levels of truth here that we may not have heard before. We may have read it, but we haven't heard. And we're going to look at that today because we're going into another level here of what she's teaching in these chapters. And it seems like she just keeps taking us to a different place, deeper and higher in consciousness than many of us have gone through, even if we've been around Unity for a long time. And I mean, there couldn't be any greater accolades for her work than Charles and Myrtle said, there's no reason for us to do this again. Do it over. They completely took what she was teaching and said, this is the basis for unity, and then built upon it, which, as I think, I've heard from some of you, you have a new appreciation even for the depths that this woman went spiritually. So she's going to do it again this week. She seems to do it every week. The key, I think, is that I'm missing a D there, how I used truth, was written 22 years, 21 years after she did Lessons in Truth. We're going to do the next book, which was written when she was 20 years old. It was 40-some years before this book. So when you look at this woman's life, it spanned 93 years. At 20 years old, as a school teacher, it was even before she became a doctor, she wrote the third book that we're going to be studying shortly. So this has spanned years, 73 years of the in-depth spiritual teaching that she left us as a guide. And in my opinion, this is only mine, I call it the golden standard. I think she gave us the greatest teachings of truth after Jesus. There's no one else, for me anyway, that has been able to capture as close to what I can imagine what the master teacher was trying to teach 2,000 plus years ago. Remember, she says this, and I do this every week, because she took us from no longer listening to we have to do. But last week she added something else, like she does on all of these principles and practices. We have to do it with expectation. And we touched on that last week. But what we do with expectation is what is manifested in our lives. We can do 1,000 affirmations. Jesus called that vain repetition. Right? If we do these affirmations with an expectation of not having it or not achieving it or not having it happen, we can stop doing the affirmations and the denial. Because the expectations are how you feel. It's what you know is going to come true for you. So one of the questions that I want you to think about going into next week is, what am I expecting for my life? What is my expectations for Unity Harrisburg? All of those aspects of your life, if you begin to ask that question, it's a new question maybe, and it'll take you back inside to some truth. Your expectations may not be aligning with what you say you want. And you've got to get those two in alignment, or nothing's going to happen. She took us to another place. My beloved found this week, and I had to use it. I am not what you think I am. You are what you think I am. Remember, she took us above J and the 4 C's last week and said it's not enough to stop judging. It's not enough to stop condemning. It's not enough to stop criticizing. It's not enough to stop complaining and comparing. Because if you do that and you're seeing it in someone else, it's because it's inside you. That's another level beyond stopping judging. That's a level of going, wait a minute, if it wasn't in me, I could never identify it and label it in them. You see, she's taken us levels. She did it in forgiveness. Forgiveness is one of the key pieces of our spiritual journey. She said it's not enough. You've got to not only forgive, but you've got to loose and let them go. So what I love about her, she's teaching in these levels as we go through, now we're into the 21st chapter that she's been teaching. But I love this. I am not what you think I am. You are what you think I am. So whenever we catch ourselves during the week in judgment and condemnation and criticism of someone else, go, wait a minute. Yellow light flashing. What do I need to look within inside me? Again, another level of teaching that we see, and we're going to see it as we continue. So lesson number 7 today is God's hand. I believe this chapter takes her whole understanding to another level. This is talking from a paradigm of oneness, where we are so in one with our source, so in one with God, that we are actually the hands of. And when you think about it, she says this, there are no other God's hands, physically, on this planet but yours and mine. You're the only hands God has, because God's Spirit. And if we don't open ourselves in that paradigm of oneness to allow that creative life force, or God, whatever word you use for that, to come through us and begin to deliver the good that's here in this world to give, we're missing the boat. I don't know how many of you wake up every morning, because I know I don't, say, oh wow, I'm God's hands. Okay, I better get to work. Must be a lot to do today. That's kind of how Charles at 93 said, right? I jump out of bed with all this zeal and enthusiasm for what is mine to do. Why? Because he knew he was the hands of God. And if he didn't do what was his to do, it didn't get done. No different than you and I. We're exactly like that. There is but one hand in the universe, and it's God's hand. Again, paradigm of oneness going to another level. You know, it's one thing to say we're one with God, but how much are we allowing our hands to be in one with God's hands? Because we are God's hands. Whenever you have felt that your hands are empty, it has been because you have believed yourself something separated from that force, from that energy, from that wisdom, from that power, from that supply. We all do it. I know I may be the only one at Unity Harrisburg, but I do it a bunch of times during the week. It's like, oh wait, I'm trying to do this again in Dan. Finite mind, trying to analyze, figure this out. Figure out how to get the energy and the power to force this to go from here to there. That's not what this is about. This is about getting so connected in the flow that it's working through you as God's hands. Our Father reaches out through those, his only hands, to give his gifts, which we have nothing to do with the supply. We want to be messing around in that supply all the time. No, got to figure this out. Not ours to do. Our part is to pass out the good freely and without ceasing. The only way you can do that is you're connected with the source. The only way you can do that is you're connected with that energy that's flowing through you. If we shut it down, there is nothing to give. And one of the keys here is I want to make a distinction. Because I've seen people on the spiritual path get all involved in giving out of their stuff. You know what I mean by that? It's different than giving what's flowing through you, and you are not in control of the supply. It's what's coming through you to give. We give from our surplus, not from trying to do it in our own way, in our own mind, so that we are losing the energy and the money and the effort and all those things. Because if we're doing it out of ourselves, we're finite. We're just going to burn out at some point. That's not what she's talking about. But we're not responsible for the supply. We need to let that move through us. If you remember back in the first book, when Dr. Katie talked about her dad, who whatever someone did lied against him, he never got back in the country. He was exiled for 5 years. And no matter what work she did, denial, affirmations, prayers, whatever, nothing ever happened. He didn't get back. But what did happen at one moment, 5 years into this, she recognized her hands as God's hands. She had a revelation. She had intuition. She had insight that came from within her out and said, you are God's hands, get to work. She's like, oh wow, I didn't realize that. And she said this, then in this hand are this man's freedom papers. Again, mentally in her, she accepted that these hands had the freedom papers for her father who was out of the country. And mentally, she extended her hand to her father and said this, here is your freedom. It's God's gift. Wake up, take it, get up, go forth. You are free. Now, there's no wimpiness in this at all. It sounded very much like Jesus said to people, right? Get up, move. Quit sitting there whining waiting for the water to move in the healing pot. Get up, you're healed. Oh, I'm healed. And that very same thing she followed after 5 years, and what happened? She then committed this entire affair to God and released it, to never think about it again. Almost immediately, he came home. All the charges were dropped, and she says in the first book that the neighbors came, and he was exonerated from all the lies. This is a woman at 20 years old wrote the book that we're going to read, doing all the work. So I guess my thing to you and to me today is, don't get impatient when it doesn't happen immediately. If you know you're on the path that always succeeds, take a breath. Relax into it. 5 years she was at this. So all of a sudden, bam, it happened. So I guess she sets the bar for you and I to stay patient for 5 years. You're going, oh no, I wanted it tomorrow. But it may not work that way, and I'm sure, and we've seen the lessons that she's learned. She talks about how incredible those lessons were, and then she's able to pass them on. So stay patient with the process. Trust it. Let it happen. Let it work, whatever you're working on. She gives a great example. Love always thinks of giving, never of receiving. God's giving is spontaneous outflow of perfect love. No conditions here. No lack, no limits, no oh buts, and no I'm not qualified or I'm not good enough, and none of that. It's unconditional, free love that flows through you and I when we're willing to open up to it and let it happen. It's perfect love, the outflow of perfect love. And we know that love conquers all, right? We all know that. But somehow we get off the path, go down a rabbit trail, get entangled in our own ego. Oh, I forgot, I'm the only one that does that. There's many, many paths that take us off in different directions. What do we do when that happens? We get still. Why? Get still and know I am God. And then it flows again. And that's what this journey is all about. In Luke, the Master said this, give and it shall be given unto you, good measure, pressed down, shaken over, running over, more than you can take. We give from an overflowing cup, not a half full one. Overflow. And the overflow can happen when you and I stay open to that divine energy, that unconditional perfect love. And he says this, Paul said this in Corinthians, no eye, that's you and I, seeing in the physical, or ear has heard, and no mind has imagined what good God has prepared for those who love him. We're going to talk about how you know when you love him. But you have never seen it, you've never heard it, and your mind cannot imagine how big and how good it is. It's infinite. But it's only infinite if you and I are willing to open up and say, yeah, I want it all. And not qualify it, not condition it, not limit it, not lack it, say, well, I'm only good enough for this much. No. All is your birthright. It's mine. But we have to what? Recognize it, acknowledge it so we can realize it. We can experience it once we do. Give as God gives, no thought for a return. Look only to God for your supply in this. Don't get caught up in, well, you know, I gave them a really nice gift and they didn't even say thank you. No. Give as God gives. How much does God give and he never hears thank you from you and me and other people? He doesn't stop giving from the surplus. It's the overflow. It is more than you and I in our finite intellect can even imagine. Our eyes never saw it, our ears never heard it, and our mind never imagined how great this is. We have to open up and let it flow. So lesson number 8, if thou knewest. That's a funny sounding word, isn't it? Knewest. So I have to rearrange that to if I knew. Seemed to work for me. If I only knew this, something would happen for me. And that's what this chapter is all about. All lies, all negativity, all lack, and all limitation, Dr. Katie says, is like darkness. She doesn't give any wiggle room here. She said, look at any of this that you see out in the world or you see within yourself and understand this is like darkness. And I love how the metaphor for this, because if we stay with this metaphor, it's so interesting what happens, and we spend, for those of us on the spiritual path in the past, we spent so much time on trying to get rid of this stuff. Right? And if you do, when you are focused on lies, if you're focused on negativity, what are you bringing back into your life? It's the boomerang universe. The law will not be mocked. If you focus and your attention on lies and negativity, you're going to bring more lies and negativity. It's like the darkness. And I love this metaphor. We're going to continue because I love how it plays out. What happens to the darkness when you turn on the light? Where's it go? Where does the darkness go? It's not hiding in that little corner back there. It doesn't exist. There is no darkness. Darkness is absence of light. And when you take that metaphor and begin to understand in your own life, any negativity, any lies, any lack, any limitation are nothing. They are no things. As again, I said, she's going to take us another level on understanding it. And how we begin to change this in our own lives. Well, you know, I have coaching clients will say to me, well, Reverend Dan, I live with someone who's negative all the time. That's a big SW. So what? It's a no thing. Who's making it a big thing? You. That person who's negative all the time has been negative probably their whole life. Their parents probably were negative. They learned it from that. They're conditioned to it, right? And when you show up and you're not willing to get entangled in that negativity because you understand it's nothing but darkness, absence of the good, that understanding alone will take you a different place. You can begin to detach a little bit and let it flow by and say, oh, there goes more negativity. It's nothing. They are nothing, no thing. Only the absence of good is what all those negatives she was talking about. How much time in your life and my life have we spent giving energy and thought and speaking about and posted on Facebook and Twitter about negative stuff? We were spending most of our lives talking about, thinking about nothing. No thing. What a waste of your energy, of your life force. And we begin to, as we take no judgment on what we've been doing, because you know, look, when we know better, we do better, don't we? That's what I love about Dr. Katie's book. She allows us to know better in a different way. But when I look at someone who wants to be filled with negativity, it's the darkness. It's no thing. That changes how I'm going to interact with it. And it will change it for you. Here's your job and mine. Turn on the light. Hello? That's why I'm a KISS kind of guy. Keep it simple, spirit. When you're around negativity, you're in your mind, you say, how do I turn on the light here? You don't turn on the light by engaging in the darkness, do you? What do you get? More darkness. But you and I, being here at Unity, know how to turn on the light. And if we begin to understand as the negativity comes at us through life and through people we know and through whatever you're involved in during the week, take a step back, take a deep breath and say, wait a minute, how do I turn on the light here? How do I turn on the light? And you become exactly what the master teacher said, the light to the world. It's easy to have light when everything coming at you is good, isn't it? Man, you're just going to grab your suspenders and say, I'm all that. Pride before the next fall. And what happens when we get prideful? Well, it's all about me. I, me, and my, isn't it? And as soon as we go there, what happens? We forget that the negativity around us is nothing but darkness. I can just turn on the light. Find as many ways during the week that you can turn on your light. We know where the light comes from. It comes out of our whole completed soul. So the light is complete. The light is whole. It's the allness of God. And when you turn that on and let that begin to dissipate the darkness, the negativity around you, it begins to change. Unhappiness, envy, selfishness, jealousy, fear, anxiety, worry, all of it is darkness. It's not real. It's a no thing. Now, I'm not saying if you have anxiety attacks that it doesn't feel real. It feels totally real, doesn't it? But when we understand that it is a no thing and that we can turn on the light, you have tools now that you can move to a place that allows you to interact with that, because any anxiety attack goes back to one thing. It begins with a thought. If you track it back, and that thought is a feeling, and that feeling becomes your consciousness, and it becomes your affairs. But when your thought goes, wait a minute, that's a no thing, I'm going to turn on the light, watch what begins to happen in that environment. It completely changes almost instantly, because you're back to your main job. It's not to engage the darkness, it's to turn on the light. And then we can proceed and go forward. Because once we do that, we begin to be led by divine wisdom or omniscience, or whatever word that you want to put to all wisdom that begins to flow through you and show you a different and better way. God, as life and love and power and wisdom, fills every space of the universe. If that was not true, if she or he did not do that, then God would not be omnipresent. So another way to look at this, if darkness is the absence of the good, when we turn on the light, what fills it? But God is omnipresent, is present in every single place in the universe. But it's only true for you and me when we recognize it and acknowledge that that is true. When we take the thought that over here, of all those she's listed, we make that true. And we lose the omnipresence, the all good of the Almighty. The only absence that exists is in a man or woman's consciousness or their lower senses. Again, it's a thought. You can only bring lack into your life if you think you do. If you think it's lacking, then you make that real and you will manifest lack. It exists as a thought. And that goes back to chapter 4 of the first book, in thinking. Because all of our thoughts create our lives. All of our thoughts create our destiny. And when we go back, we can trace them back then to find what is that thought that I'm thinking that's bringing this lack into my life. And I can change that in a second. Folks, you and I are one thought away from happiness all day. Just one thought. No matter how upset you are, no matter how anxious you are, no matter how angry you are, you're one thought. And what's that thought? I'm happy. We can take it back to thought, make the change, And the change changes your feelings, and the feelings change your consciousness, and consciousness changes your life. It's always back to one thought. In overcoming undesirable conditions in our life, here's the two things she says to do. Number one, deny the darkness. It does not exist. It's nothing. Say that to yourself next time you're anxious. Say that to yourself the next time you see someone who's bringing negativity into you and say, you know what? That doesn't exist here. It's nothing for me. And then the number two is let in the substance of good, let in God, let in source, let in creative life force, whatever words you use, but you've got to let the light in. So we deny the first, say it doesn't exist in my life, and then we turn the light on. Same process over and over and over again. The process is not complex. What's complex is you have to remember. Because when you forget, you go right back to where? Your habitual process. Your habitual thoughts. The way you interact with negativity, you've been trained from whenever. This is another way, a new way. We have to build this habit to be able to do that. Dr. Katie says to use this truth all day long. She uses this affirmation over and over and over again. It's a little cumbersome, but I think the concept you're going to see at the very end, I use it as a daily practice. The Son of God in me is now manifested, made visible in my body and all my affairs. He, she comes not to destroy, but to fill full. This is the definition of fulfilled. Filled full of Spirit. If you took the time every morning to fill up, the best example, I guess, would be an electric car. Plug that big old thing in, get filled up. Make it a metaphor for you. How am I going to get filled full this morning before I begin my day? When you say here the Son of God, what she's talking about here is the Christ, the I am. I use my whole completed soul. Whatever word works for you here, but we've got to acknowledge it, and that's part of what she's saying, is now manifested, is real in me, made visible, not only in my body, but all my affairs. This is an affirmation that she uses every day whenever she begins to slide in her belief and trust. Lesson number 9 for today. Trusting and resting. And we're going to another level here. What does trusting mean? And do you trust? So quiet tension is not trust. It is simply compressed anxiety. Well, I'm feeling a little bit better. I got control of that tension. She's like, no. All you're doing is compressing your anxiety. And that's not a place to live from. That's not where we want. Again, that's a lack and limitation of this flow, of the natural flow of the divine within us. When we grow anxious, anyone here anxious? Oh, you put it in. Anybody got anxious this week for any reason? 3 hands went up. Meg got every hand up. When we grow anxious, and we all do we not? Anybody tells you they're not anxious today is liar. Everybody gets anxious a little bit. When we grow anxious, we are no longer open for the divine flow. We shut it off. Completely. What is anxiety? Darkness, no thing. Turn on the light. You can't turn on the TV today and not get anxious. And you can leave the TV off and you're still going to be anxious because it's in the waves. It's in the consciousness. Everywhere you go, you see it in people's faces, right? You see it with a mask on, you look at their eyes and you can see it in their eyes. From the smallest thing of our everyday life to the rolling away of the largest stone of difficulty in front of our path, the presence will come to deliver you. The smallest detail to the biggest thing. I've had coaching clients who's like, I said, well, why didn't you turn that over? Well, I didn't want to bother God on that one. What? Oh, you only want to hold the big ones. Every detail. And we begin to do that, you have a new habit. It's like, I don't have to do this. I'm not alone in figuring out the way through all of this called life. We have a guide within. We have a light that goes in front of us if we stay connected to it and not try to do it out of our own stuff, from our own energy and our own mind. But it's working depends. So all of that, the smallest detail to the biggest boulder, only works. It depends on our trusting, and trusting means going still inside. So you all know what I mean when I say you have that hidden gerbil wheel in your mind. That one that goes around and around and around, goes nowhere. That is not stillness. What she's talking about here, in total trust, you have nothing but stillness in your mind. There's nothing but stillness in your body. And if you're not still, you're not trusting. I told you she's going to take us to another level here. It's one thing to deny anxiety and say, I'm going to turn on the light. But now she's saying, we got to go to a level of trust. Complete trust means complete stillness inside. I use the word peace. If you feel peace within yourself, then you are trusting. But if you're not peaceful within yourself, then you are not trusting. And there's work to be done there. You and I can do that. I had to put this one on because I just love this one with their little red shoes there, looking out of the window. Be still before the creative life force. Be still before the source. And she goes on to say, don't give one thought to those people who are getting away with it. Why? Because the law will not be mocked. Karma comes for anyone who wants to delve in negativity, who wants to delve in judgment, condemnation, criticism. It's coming. You and I don't have to put one thought to it. There's no place in us for revenge. We step back from it and let it do its thing. Be still before the Almighty and let the law work. With no engagement from you and I. That's a place of trust. That's a place of stillness. That's a place to live from. That is close to heaven on earth as I know. So we couldn't leave today without a quick Bible story. How many of you know King Jehoshaphat? King Jehoshaphat was completely surrounded on all sides by mighty, mighty armies of Ammonites and Moabites. Now, when I was a kid, I thought that's where the Mennonites got their words from. All the ites. Must be Mennonite, Moabites, Ammonites. They was completely surrounded, and they said there was no way that we were going to survive. Not one of us will survive. We're going to be wiped off the face of the earth. And what he did was this. It's called the Jehoshaphat Prayer. O Lord God of our fathers, are you not God in heaven? And do you not rule over all kingdoms of the nations? And in your hand is there not power and might so that no one is able to withstand you? And that's when all his subjects were pulling their hair out in terror, and then what are we going to do? We're so surrounded, we're going to lose it. Everyone's going to be killed and everyone's going to die. And he stood up and he got still and said this. And he went on to say this battle is not ours, it's God's. And the level of trust that you have to make this true. When Jacqueline and I went through what we did in August 3rd, this is exactly where I went, to Jehoshaphat. And I can remember that day sitting there and saying to Jacqueline, this is not our battle, it's God's. We're not to look at it. I've got to do all those things they've asked me to do. I will do all those. But I knew from the get-go, I trusted that it was God's battle, not mine. And when you do, there's a peace that comes over, because that's the question, are you peaceful over this? But when you turn it over and say, okay, it's yours, and then don't get entangled in it. Keep doing business as usual, which is what I've done 3 months ago. But it's never been my battle. And it's never been yours unless you want to pick it up and make it yours. Because you're the one that makes it your battle. Not God, not me, not them, you and me, for myself. And when you do that, some amazing things begin to happen. What Jehoshaphat did is they went out that morning when they were about to be slaughtered, and he told everybody, I want you to trust completely, and I want you to begin to sing. And they sang a song, Our Salvation is Jehovah. And they walked out of their city. Now at this time, they trusted so deeply that they were singing that their salvation was Jehovah. They didn't even see the armies until they were singing, they went out, and as they turned the corner, there was all the Moabites and all the other ites, all slain dead. Everyone was wiped out. But here's the thing, when we're willing to trust at that level, let me tell you what the ending of that story was. Not only did they not get slain, the other army was completely wiped out, but they spent 3 days collecting all the rubies and all the emeralds and all the stuff, pressed down so much you can't carry it. So the end of the story is if they had tried to do it in their humanness, they would have probably lost. They were outnumbered 10-1. But because they recognized that it was not their battle, it was God's, not only were the others defeated, but they got the spoils of the success. 3 days they carried more gems and gold and emeralds back to their city. They were wealthier than they ever could have imagined. That's trust. This picture is a picture of the ladies as they were going to the tomb to take care of Jesus after he was brought down from the cross. And on the way they said, there's this many, many ton stone that they sealed the cave, right? Sealed the tomb with. How are we ever going to get there? It was exceedingly great, they said. And when they arrived, it was open. It doesn't matter the smallest detail in your life to the most exceedingly great or grand. If we trust the process, we will watch it begin to unfold. And it's a promise from the Almighty that not only will you succeed, but the spoils will be so great that you cannot even carry them. Emily says this, just try to realize that the battle is God's through you, and that because it's his battle, her battle, it has been victory before the start and can never be anything else. It's a guaranteed victory. And we're to begin to celebrate the victory. That's the trust, to trust at that level, that exactly what God's battle is about. He's not only going to win, but you and I are going to get the spoils of the win. Begin to sing and praise him for deliverance and give no thought for anything else. Now, I wish I could tell you, honestly, that was true for the last 3 months. For me, it wasn't. I had my days down the rabbit path, but not many. And I knew how to get back. Because my job was to turn on the light, release the whole situation, and let it be God's battle. It's true for you if you make it true. You have to be able to willing to turn on the light. You know, we have these cliches in the spiritual world, let go and let God. And when people say that to me, I say, well, how do you do that? And they go, well, you just got to let go. No, we now know what to do. We know to turn on the light. And we know to begin to sing and trust at the highest level that truth is true for you and me always. The more we cut off from human help, the greater claim we can make on the divine help to come through Trusting means resting confidence. Ask yourself, what's my confidence in this? If your confidence is that it's not going to happen, you're not trusting. And if you could ask yourself, yes, I am confident that this will be what it's going to be, then you're in a level of trust because the battle's already won in spirit, and it takes some time to manifest in the physical. That's where you and I have to become patient. We got to wait a minute. I know I'm on track here. I'm following the lit path. I've got to let it work its way through, whatever that might be. Remember, you plant the seed, then you get a sprout, then you get an ear start to show up, and then you have harvest. There's a natural progression in all of this, and that's where many times we get impatient and then want to quit. Thou wilt keep me, or you, in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee, because you and I trusted in that. We trusted in that power. We trusted in that intelligence and wisdom. We will be kept in perfect peace. I'm not saying it's going to come out the way you think it will. That's not what this is about. It's going to come out in a perfect way, in perfect peace. And when you hold that, you are in peace. And no matter what's going on around you with all that stuff, it doesn't matter. Because you're already in peace, and you know that the victory is already happening. That's trust. So daily practice, I have 3. First one, my hands are God's hands, and I give as God gives, no thought of return. Give as God gives, no thought of return. But give from your surplus, because you're not responsible for the supply. It's what's coming through you, and you, have extra to give away. My whole and completed soul is manifested in my thoughts, feelings, and affairs. I am made whole. You and I, our birthright is to be whole, complete. And as we begin to acknowledge that and bring that in our belief system, it begins to manifest in our thoughts and our feelings and our consciousness and our affairs in our body. And the last one, every day, find a way to rest in confidence and total trust. My way of doing that is I say, God's got this. He's got it. I don't need to get involved. He's got it. God's got this. Okay. Let's go to silence, please. One of the things we learned today is that all of these promises are true for those who love God. One of the ways to love God is know what God's name is. God's like all of us, likes people who know his name. And as we learned last week, his name is I Am. But we're going to take this meditation a little bit deeper. Last week, we said the name of God, I Am. This week, we want to have a conversation with God. Because when we get still and we get quiet and we use the name of God, God will answer us back with I am. So I'm going to ask you as you take a couple deep breaths and allow yourself to get still. What I like to do with my spiritual eyes when they're closed is look up to the center, get connected with divine light. And just get connected with whatever word you use, whether it's the Christ within or the I am, whole completed soul, the God within, the divine. Allow yourself to get connected there. And as you get settled into that divinity within you, just to yourself quietly, say the words, God's name, I am, and then be quiet, be still, and listen for him to respond back. It's the still small voice. I call it the small flute. In our mind, our human mind is the brass band. Listen for the still small flute to respond back. know that there's no greater way for you to show your love for God than use God's name. I am. And as you listen for the response, it opens up that channel of communication and intuition, insight, revelation, whatever words you want, coming from your soul, not from your mind. It's there for you every second of every day, hidden away inside. And let that guide you as we go forward into this week. And so it is.